My father was buried a few days later. My mother, sister and I then sat down together at home and talked about what we should now do. After a long discussion, it was decided that the family home would be sold. My mother's plan was to buy a smaller house near the coast and turn it into a school for young ladies. In this way, she believed she could earn enough money to live on. "What do you think of the idea, Agnes?" she asked me. "Would you leave your job with the Murray family to come and help run a school with me?" "Yes, of course," I told her. "And the money I have earned will buy us furniture and equipment." It was sad to say goodbye to the old family home. I had been born in that house and had spent my early years there. My mother said she would stay until the house was sold and she would make all the preparations for the new school. So I went back to Horton Lodge to work the last 6 weeks that were still left before the summer holidays. Having explained to Mrs. Murray what had happened, I told her that I would not be returning in the autumn. During those last 6 weeks at Horton, I hardly saw Mr. Weston. Every day I hoped I would bump into him on my walks, but for the first 2 weeks I saw him only at church. I felt disappointed, and I told myself that he clearly did not care for me. If he loved me, would he not come to find me? How silly I had been to hope that he might care about me. I should forget all about him. But then, at last, I saw him. He was on the path walking towards me as I was going through the fields to Nancy Brown's cottage for a visit. He must have heard from people in the village that my father had died, but he did not mention it. But almost the first words he spoke were, "How is your mother?" It was a sincere question that seemed full of warmth. I thanked him for asking about her and told him she was as well as could be expected, but sad, of course. "What is she going to do?" he asked kindly. I explained to him that my mother was planning to open a new school and that I was going to help her to run it. "Then are you going to leave Horton Lodge soon?" he said. "Yes, in a month," I replied. He said nothing for a minute, and it seemed as though he was deep in thought. Then he spoke again. "And do you want to leave here?" "Yes, in some ways," I told him. "Only in some ways? I wonder what things might make you want to stay," he said. He sounded surprised. I did not like this question, partly because it embarrassed me. I had only one reason to want to stay, and that reason was a big secret. "Why have you made the assumption that I am not happy in this place?" I asked. "Because you told me yourself that you missed your family terribly and that you had no friends here," Mr. Weston said. "Well," I replied, "that may be true, but it would be impossible to live somewhere for 2 years without feeling some sadness when you leave." "Will you be sad to leave Miss Matilda, who is your only pupil and friend now?" he asked. "It will probably be a little difficult to say goodbye to her. I did feel sad when I said goodbye to her sister," I admitted. "Yes, I can imagine that," he commented. "Well, Miss Matilda is as nice as Miss Rosalie, or perhaps actually nicer than her in one way," I told him. "In what way is that?" he wanted to know. "She usually tells the truth," I said simply. so at least I can say she is honest." "And her older sister is not?" he said. "Well, perhaps she is not actually dishonest, but I have to admit that she can be quite creative with the truth," I told him. "Ah," he said thoughtfully. "So she is creative with the truth." I could see that she was a bit silly and loved to talk about herself, yes. And now I can believe that she wasn't fully honest either. That would certainly explain a few things that I hadn't understood before. After that, he changed the subject and talked about more general things. He did not leave me until he had walked with me to the gates of Horton Lodge. He must have gone out of his way to walk that far with me. He had not mentioned love, or led me to believe that he cared for me, but I was very happy despite this. To be near him, to hear him talk, to know that he wanted to speak to me was enough to make me happy. Yes, Mr. Edward Weston, if I had one friend here, one friend who truly loved me, and if that friend were you, then I would definitely want to stay here. I would be happier than I can imagine, I thought to myself. Who knows what can happen in a month? I am 22 years old, and the last few years have been hard. But perhaps I will be lucky now. Perhaps the sun will shine on me at last. I remained hopeful for a while, but the time I had left in Horton slowly passed away, 1 week after another, and I hardly saw him. And then the last Sunday came, and I went to the village church for the last time to hear him preach. I listened to his sermon, surely the last one of his I would hear, and I tried hard not to cry. After the service, I was leaving the church when I heard a quiet voice just behind me. "I suppose you are leaving Horton this week, Miss Grey," said Mr. Weston. "Yes," I replied. I was surprised to see him standing there. "Well," he said, "I just wanted to say goodbye before you leave." "Goodbye, Mr. Weston," I said. How difficult it was to say that calmly. I gave him my hand, and he held it gently in his own hands for a few seconds. "It is possible that we may meet again in the future," he said. "Would it make any difference to you whether we did or not?" "Yes," I said. "I would be very glad to see you again." He held my hand gently in his for a moment and then left. Now I was happy again, although probably more likely to burst into tears than ever. I walked home with Matilda, but I could not concentrate on what she was saying. All I could think about was Mr. Weston, how he had held my hand, how he had smiled kindly at me, and what he had said. After several minutes, Matilda suddenly shouted at me. "Are you deaf or stupid, Miss Grey? Have you not heard anything that I have been telling you?" she cried. Matilda had woken me from my daydreams about Mr. Weston. I looked up at her and asked her to tell me again what she had been saying. I left Horton Lodge and went to join my mother in Scarborough, a popular town on the coast in Yorkshire. She seemed to be in good health and had organised the new schoolhouse well. To begin with, we had 9 students, but we hoped to have more pupils in the future. I was happy to start work with my mother, and it was certainly different compared to the jobs I had already had. In the first few weeks, I enjoyed teaching the pupils, and I was happy. When I was not busy, I daydreamed about Mr. Weston. It is possible that we may meet again in the future, and would it make any difference to you whether we did or not? I repeated his words over and over again in my head. They gave me great hope. I will see him again. He will come and visit me, or he will write to me, I told myself. Whenever I heard a knock at the front door and the maid came to say that a gentleman was there, I hoped it was him. And every time the postman came, I felt sure that he was going to bring a letter from Mr. Weston. But each time I was terribly disappointed. Mr. Weston did not come, and no letter arrived. I began to wonder if I had imagined the moment I had shared with him on that last Sunday outside the church. As the months passed, I began to lose hope. I told myself I had been stupid to think that he liked me. He had just been trying to be polite. "Agnes, you do not seem very well," said my mother one day in April. "I don't think this change has done you any good at all. I've never seen you look so sad and tired. You should relax and go out a little more." My mother was right. I had given up hope and now felt miserable. I often did not feel hungry, and I was beginning to feel weak and ill. I told myself that I needed to look after myself for my mother's sake. She needed me with her and needed my help. If I could not be happy myself, at least I could make sure that she was happy. I decided not to think about Mr. Weston any more, or at least I would try not to. I told myself that I would go for walks and eat well. By following these rules I made for myself, I started to feel a little better. In June, I received a letter from Lady Ashby, or as I had known her before her marriage, Miss Rosalie. In her letter, she told me that life was very boring at Ashby Park, and that she would very much like to see me. "To my dearest Miss Grey, I hope you are well and are not missing Horton Lodge too much. I have been at Ashby Park a little while now, and it is beautiful, but so dull. I do not have a single friend here, and you know that I have never liked the idea of just my husband and I living tightly together like two birds in a nest. I am sure that your holidays will begin in June. When they do, please come and see me straight away. In fact, if you do not come, I think I might die. I want you to come and see me as a friend, and not as my old governess. You will have your own room and as many books as you can read. Do you like babies? I can't remember if you do or do not. If you do, you will want to meet mine. It is well behaved, and thankfully I have a maid here to look after it for me. Unfortunately, it is a girl, and Sir Thomas is disappointed that I did not give him a son instead. But if you visit me, I promise that you will be its governess as soon as it can talk. You can teach it and make it into a much better woman than its mother. You will be able to see my wonderful new home, and I am sure that you will love it. It is full of expensive Italian paintings and all sorts of things that I bought while on my honeymoon. And you can meet my new dog, which I had sent over all the way from Paris. Write to me as soon as you can, and tell me when your holidays start. Tell me that you will come on the very first day that you can, and that you will stay until the moment you have to return. Your friend, Rosalie Ashby. I showed this strange letter to my mother and asked her what I should do. She advised me to go to Ashby Park and visit Rosalie. I liked the idea of going to see her and her new baby. I hoped that I could help her if she were unhappy. Of course, I imagined that she must be unhappy, or she would not have written to me in this way. I wrote back to her and agreed to go and stay with her for a few days. I had partly agreed to go because Ashby Park was not far from the village of Horton. I secretly hoped that I might see Mr. Weston while I was there, or at least hear something about him. There was no doubt that Ashby Park was a wonderful place to live. The house itself was impressive and elegant, and the large park was beautiful. There was a big lake, ancient woods, and herds of deer. I could see why Rosalie had been so keen to become the lady of an estate like this one. She seemed pleased to see me, and although I was just a poor governess and a school teacher, she welcomed me warmly to her home. However, I did not like her efforts to make me feel comfortable. She told me that I should not be embarrassed about how I looked. She also said I should not worry if I felt that the beauty of the place was too much for me. I did not feel at all embarrassed about how I looked, and nothing that I saw around me in Ashby Park shocked me half as much as the changes I saw in Rosalie herself. During the 12 months since I had last seen her, she had changed in a way you might expect to see after 12 years, not months. She was much thinner, looked very tired, and seemed sad. Her new baby girl, who Sir Thomas felt should have been a boy, was just 7 or 8 weeks of age. I was surprised to see that Rosalie did not seem to be interested in the baby. She was happy to let the maid take care of everything that the baby needed. My bedroom was small but pleasant. Rosalie also showed me a small sitting room where I could spend time alone and read if I wanted to. I was taken on a tour of the house and was shown the fine Italian paintings and the fat French dog that was lying on an expensive-looking cushion. Rosalie seemed very pleased with all these things. However, when we had finished the tour, she took me into the main sitting room and then sat down in a chair. We sat in silence for a moment. Despite all of these impressive things that she had wanted so much, Rosalie did not seem happy. I asked her some questions, deciding to save my most important question until last. I started by asking her how her parents were. She told me that they were well enough. "And how is Matilda?" I asked her.
"Oh, she is very well," Rosalie replied. "She is still wild and a little silly, but she has now got a new fashionable governess. At last her manners are improving, and Mother will soon hold a ball at Horton Lodge so that she can be introduced to society."
"And how are the other people in the village?" I asked. "Mr. Hatfield, for example."
"Ah, Mr. Hatfield," she said with a smile. "I heard that he proposed to an old spinster and married her not long ago. He must have decided that he had not been lucky when he chose someone young and beautiful, so now he has chosen someone old and rich."
"And the Melton family?" I continued, ignoring her comment about Mr. Hatfield.
"Oh, I don't know much about them. I suppose they are all right," she told me.
"Well, I think I have asked about everybody."
"Oh, but not Mr. Weston," I said. "What is he doing?" "I don't know. He's not in Horton any more," Rosalie told me. How long ago did he leave? And where has he gone? I asked, trying not to sound too interested to hear her reply. I don't know anything about him, she said, looking out of the window. Only that he left about a month ago. I didn't ask where he had gone. It seems that all the people in the village were very upset when he left because they liked him so much. Mr. Hatfield did not like them all making a fuss about him leaving, of course. He did not like Mr. Weston because he was so popular and he did not do things the way he was told to. Then Rosalie stood up. Anyway, I really must go and rest for a while before dinner. I will have to eat with Sir Thomas and his mother, old Lady Ashby, in the formal dining room. Ugh, it's so dull. But I'll ask the maid to bring your dinner to you in the sitting room if that is all right. I told her it was. She had invited me to her home as her friend, but we both knew that the social rules meant that it would not be correct for a poor school teacher to eat dinner with people as important as Sir Thomas and Lady Ashby. I walked back to the little sitting room where I could relax and look out onto the gardens. I ate my dinner there and then sat for a while thinking about Lady Ashby's present life and her past life, and about the little information she had given me about Mr. Weston. I was not rich enough to own a watch, so I did not know what time it was or how long I had been sitting and thinking. The sun began to disappear behind the trees of the estate. As it began to get dark, I felt lonely. I was tired and wished that I could go home. I was thinking about going back to my room when Rosalie appeared. She apologised several times for having left me alone for so long. She blamed her horrible old mother-in-law, who she said had made her stay longer in the dining room. But I don't know why I had to stay there so long, she added. Sir Thomas never really listens to me. When he is in a bad mood, all he does is complain, and when he is in a good mood, all he does is talk nonsense. And then, in either situation, he always drinks too much and falls asleep on the sofa. Could you not ask him to drink less and keep him busy with something else? I suggested. After all, you are very persuasive and are very good at keeping a man entertained. You think I am here to entertain him? She cried. That's not my idea of a wife. It is the husband's job to keep his wife happy. It's not her responsibility to please him. And no, I will not persuade him to change his habits. I have enough work just putting up with him as he is without making even more of an effort in order to change him. She paused to take a breath. But I am so sorry that I left you alone for so long. What have you been doing? Well, mainly sitting here looking at the park, I admitted. Goodness, how boring that must have been, she told me. Well, let's go to bed now, but tomorrow I will show you around the park. The next morning after breakfast, Rosalie took me to see the gardens as she had promised. We walked through the park, talking about what Rosalie had seen and done on her honeymoon. While we were walking, a gentleman on a horse rode towards us. As he passed us, he looked straight at me, so I could clearly see what he looked like. He was tall and very thin, with a pale face that was a little grey. He had dull, cold eyes. He made no attempt to say hello to us. Ugh, I hate that man, Lady Ashby said quietly as soon as he had ridden away.
Who is he? I asked her.
Sir Thomas Ashby, she replied coldly. My husband.
I was shocked, but I asked her, do you really hate him?
Yes, I do, Miss Grey. And if you knew him, you would not blame me for hating him, she told me.
But you knew what he was like before you married him, I commented.
No, I only thought I knew him, she said. I remember that you told me not to marry him. I know that I should have listened to you, but it's too late to say that now. At first I thought that what he was like wouldn't matter. I thought he would let me do whatever I liked. But he keeps me here like a prisoner, and he pays me no attention. He won't let me go to London and have fun with my friends because he says that I flirt with other men and spend too much money. But he does exactly what he wants. He goes to London and leaves me here alone. He gambles and flirts with other women, and is almost always drunk. Oh, I would give anything at all not to be married to that horrible man, but to be Miss Murray again. Then she stopped speaking and burst into tears.
Of course, I felt very sorry for her. I tried to comfort her and give her some advice. I told her to keep calm and try to be polite to her husband. I suggested that she should try not to think about him and keep herself busy with other things, perhaps reading, and especially her new little daughter. I reminded her that her little baby would grow into a young woman who would truly love her.
But what if the child grows up to be just like its father? Cried Rosalie.
I don't think that is likely. She is a girl and she looks very much like you, I told her.
Even so, I can't put all of my hopes in a child, she said. It is only one step better than focusing your whole life on a dog. And I can't spend my life reading. I am young and I should be having fun.
The best way to enjoy yourself, I told her, is to do what is right and hate nobody. The more wise and good you are, the more happiness you have. And I have one more piece of advice to offer you. Don't make an enemy of your mother-in-law. I have never met her, but I have heard good things as well as bad things about her. If you could be kind to her, I believe that in time she could become a good friend for you here. But I'm afraid that Rosalie did not really listen to any of the advice I had given her. I realized that I could be of little help to her, and this made it even more painful for me to see what her life had become. Rosalie begged me to stay longer, but after 2 more days, I told her that my mother needed me at the school. I was very sorry to say goodbye to Rosalie and leave her in her wonderful but sad house. I knew she was very unhappy, but I could see no easy way out of the life which she herself had chosen.